My name is Mike Beal. I'm a past president of then the Canadian Historical Aircraft Association and a proud member of now the Canadian Aviation Museum. I'll tell you a story about Bad Penny and how this began. As a board member, I was contacted by the Air Force Club here in Windsor, a member, a fellow named Bob Upcott. And Bob was looking for a guest speaker, and he wanted to hear about the story of what we were doing with the Lancaster bomber in Jackson Park, our maintenance program, and all the other wonderful things that he's heard about the Mosquito and other aircraft that we're working on. And Bob said to me, Mike, come on by my house and drop off some bio information so I can introduce you properly. Certainly, Bob, no problem at all. I had a friend with me named Jack Davidson. Jack and I met Bob in Bob's backyard, and we were chatting. And I knew that Bob was in the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, but I didn't know what he did. And I said to Bob, what was your proudest moment in World War II? I was trying to draw out his story. And he said, our proudest moment. He always spoke about himself as a crew member. I found out later that Bob was the pilot of the Lancaster. Anyway, what Bob said to me is our proudest moment occurred on April 29th, 1945. And he was rather firm about that. And I said, what's that all about, Bob? Well, we were voluntold that we would be flying a mission to drop food in the Netherlands. And I still didn't know anything about the Operation Mana story, and he told me about it. In the late winter and spring of 1944 and 45, the German military had taken all the food from the Netherlands, and the population of the Netherlands were suffering. In the late spring of 45, the statistic he heard was that 1,000 people a day were dropping dead of starvation. And the Germans were basically punishing the Dutch because in the south of the Netherlands, they went on strike. Knowing that liberation was close, they attempted to stop the German military from resupply. And the canals, all the barges, everything went on strike. And the Germans got even. That's when they took all their food. Now, Bob explained that the royal family, the Dutch royal family, were living in Canada, in Ottawa, and they were contacted by the Red Cross, and they said to the royal family, Your Majesty, your people are dying at a rate of 1,000 a day, and we need to do something about this. The royal family contacted the Royal Air Force and RCAF and said, we cannot wait for liberation. We need food now. And the concept of food drops began, the idea began at that time. Now, the squadron that Bob and his crew, the Bad Penny crew, flew with was RAF 101 Squadron, Special Forces D. So they were assigned special projects. They were told that on April 27th, 1945, you would be dropping food in the Netherlands. The Germans had been informed that these were missions of mercy, and if you fire on these aircraft, we will try you as war criminals. Now, the date again was April 27th, the first mission planned. April 27th arrived. Food was loaded in the Lancaster. Weather shut them down. They couldn't fly. April 28th came and went. Weather shut them down. 1,000 people a day. On the morning of April 29th, they took off. And flying low and slow over the English Channel, they cleared the dikes of the Netherlands at very low altitude. And Bob said they dropped food south of Den Haag at a horse racetrack. There was a big oval, good target, and they dropped their food. Now, this is where basically the story ended with Bob in his backyard. And Jack Davidson and I walked away saying, we just met an amazing guy. We know he flew those wartime missions and dropped his load bombs whenever he was told to. But his proudest mission was delivering food to the Netherlands. Great story, wonderful stuff. We walked away. I did my little presentation at the Air Force Club, and 2 weeks later, Jack and his wife, Duffy Davidson, were traveling up near Port Elgin, up in the Lake Huron area. They stopped at a motel, and Duffy walked over to a kiosk in the middle of the lobby, and they're selling pies and cakes and cookies and little brochures about other things. She picked up a brochure, and it spoke to a man named Peter Buttinar. He was the land developer offering houses, building houses, land for sale, this kind of thing. And right at the bottom of the brochure was a little sort of aside. Then the interviewer said, Mr. Buttinar has a picture of a Lancaster bomber on his office wall, and he said it didn't drop bombs, it dropped food. Interesting. That triggered Duffy. Duffy picked up the phone and called me. He said, Mike, there's a story about a guy up here in Port Elgin who was Dutch. He's a Dutch fellow. He came over following World War II. He came to Canada, and he talked. There's a story about him getting food, the Operation Manna story. I said, well, what's his phone number? So I called him immediately. Hello, Peter. My name is Mike Beal. I'm with Canadian Aviation Museum, and I heard that you have a picture of a Lanc dropping food on your office wall. And they said, oh yeah, exactly. Well, by any chance, were you a recipient of any of the food drops at the end of World War II called Operation Manna? He said, oh yes, I was, yeah. It's one of the reasons why I came to Canada. Those Canadian aircraft, the people who fed us, I came to Canada. Fascinating, great stuff. And I said, well, I was talking to someone else a couple of weeks ago, and I think the official first drop was April 29th, 1945, somewhere south of Den Haag. And the phone went dead. And I thought, way to go, Michael. You may have brought back some memories that made him a little uncomfortable. So being an old sales guy, if the customer stops talking, so do you. I waited, which is very difficult for me. And Peter finally spoke, and he said, Michael, you have to hear my story. Sure, Peter, yeah. I know the date was April 29th, 1945, because on that day, that was the first aircraft I saw, the first food drops. And the story he told me was, I was 14 years old. I was walking across a field on a way to a German garrison to steal food. If they would have caught me, they would have shot me. I didn't care, I was starving. As I was walking across the field, I heard the sound of big bombers, and I knew that sound, I've heard it many times, and I jumped into a ditch, and I looked up, and two Lancaster bombers flying in echelon off each other's wing flew right over me, and the man in the lead aircraft waved at me, and they dropped food at a horse racetrack. No, I didn't tell him about the horse race. He told me about the horse racetrack. And he knew the name of it, and I mispronounced it horribly, and I do apologize for anybody who might be listening. Duindijk Racetrack. And I said, well, Peter, can we go over this again? What time of day was that? Well, Mike, it was 50 some odd years ago. It was early in the morning, I don't know, 8 or 9 o'clock or something like that. And again, April 29th was the date, and it was a horse racetrack. And the man waved at you. The bombardier actually waved at you. He was flying solo. Yes. Peter, I'll call you right back. Hello, Bob. It's Mike Beal calling. Can we go over this again? April 29th, 1945. Yeah. South of Den Haag? Yeah. And dropped at a horse racetrack? Yes. And I didn't say that. I didn't say the name because I couldn't remember pronounce it correctly anyway. But anyway, Bob said, yeah, it was a horse racetrack. And he said, I remember the first food drop because I missed the racetrack kind of, and I dropped food on the houses beyond the track. I said, okay, fine. But anyway, and I thought, okay, well, Bob, what time of day was that? He said, oh, Mike, I'd have to check my logbook. But I think it was like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay, this is the part that I figured this was going to blow the story. Bob, how many aircraft were involved in this first test mission? Oh, there were 2 of us. Our crew, mainly Canadians, there was a couple of British guys, but mainly Canadians. We were in the lead aircraft, and there was mainly an Australian crew in RAF 101 Squadron flying. Bob, who's your bombardier? Oh, that's Bill Gray, he lives in London, Ontario. Bob, I'll call you back. Hello, Peter. Peter, I'm not sure about this, but I think I may have found the guy that flew the aircraft over you that day. And his name is Bob Upcott from Windsor, Ontario. And the name of the bombardier, the bomb aimer that waved at you, his name is Bill Gray. He lives in London, Ontario. Marvelous Dutch accent. I want to meet these guys. So we arranged for a meeting underneath the Lancaster in Jackson Park at the time. And Bill Gray came down from London, and of course Bob and their wives, Jack Davidson, myself, and the meeting was amazing. The crying and tears, and that was us. You should have seen them. But it was a great way to meet, and it was 50 some odd years later, and the stories fit. We couldn't corroborate the whole thing, but the story itself fit. So we went with it, and it's been a great run. It really has. The thing about Peter Buttinar was that he made a point of saying thank you in many ways. And one of the things that he did, as I mentioned, Peter was a builder, a contractor, and he was offering houses for sale, and he needed names for his streets. And so the main street of his new development became Lancaster Way. The first street off the side became Bob Upcott Drive. The next one became Stan Jones Drive. Every crew member got a street named after them. And of course, there was a dedication ceremony, which is what Peter loved to do. And there was a Dakota DC-3 flying overhead, and speeches, and I think there's some video of that occasion. But Peter got a chance to say thank you, and it was really it's been an extraordinary ride. I told this story then to a friend of the Canadian Aviation Museum, a guy named Dr. Glenn Mitchell. And when I told Glenn the story, he said, "Mike, somebody should write a book about this." And I said, "Yes, somebody should." So he did. And Glenn wrote the book, A Bad Penny Always Comes Back, which is just a wonderful, heartwarming story. One of the things that, just as a little side story that's kind of interesting, is that these guys who were 19, 20, 21 years old, flying in this aircraft, believed in the Lucky Charms, and they had all kinds of little gimmicks to make sure that they came home. And what they carried with them all during the war was one of the large British pennies of the day. And this particular coin belonged to Bob Upcott, and he carried it with him during the war. These are important because they were carried by the crew. There were other examples. One of the other coins that he carried is now in his son's possession, David Upcott. The third went to another fellow who helped out enormously around here, Michael Coates. So there are 3 of these coins, and I got one. We carry these, whenever I speak in public, I carry this with me. And it's scratched N2, and Bob identified his aircraft when on landing. NAN2 is calling, NAN2. So this is Bob's coin. And with permission, I would like to donate this coin when the Lancaster is finished at its dedication ceremony. And if we could find a place to put this on the instrument panel someplace in Bob's memory. This coin doesn't really belong to me. It belongs with that Lancaster. I would like to give that, if I may.